We are today doing block 3 of my summer quilts. I haven't made the block yet, which is a bit naughty. I should have. But this is the block that we're going to do. And it is, you can see it just there. And we're going to make that now. So first thing you're going to need is something nice to refresh yourself. I've just got my lovely little peachy water. Now, whenever I do EPP projects, I have always got these fabulous little bags filled with the little offcuts of the fabric that I was using. And if you don't believe me, you can see I have a bag for every colour. And I'm a firm believer that you need to make sure that we are looking after our environment. So I use my bags as many times as I can possibly do it, mainly because it's greener, it's better. And yeah. So, am I a bit skew there? Sorry, I think I'm a bit skew. As always, big mess. Sorry, it's a working studio. So when you get the pattern from Natasha, you're going to get the pattern like this. You are going to get, I think you get 5 of these. You're only going to need 4 for this pattern. And when you've done it, I suggest that you write down the colorways on what we're doing. So number 1 is cream, number 2 is purple, number 3 is purple, 4 is cream. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is cream. 6 and 7 are green. 8 is cream. 9, 10, 12, and 13 are light purple, and number 11 is cream. So I've decided I'm going to use the green grunge as my green. I'm using cream as my background. I'm going to be using this as my purple, which is a gorgeous magenta. And then I'm using a purple grunge for my light purple. And what I always try and do is whenever I'm doing them, before I actually put it all together, is I do actually try and sample them all together, hold them together, and then step away and check that nothing pops out. Now, what I love about this is that this is a little bit brighter, this magenta. It's a lot brighter, so I'm hoping that that center part of my flower is going to go, boo! That was so silly. Apologies. Anyway, that is my plan. I've got my little piece of paper. When you get your block like this, I always trim about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, only because it just makes your piece of paper a little easier to use when you are putting it together and you're going through it all. On your pattern on page 4, I think it is, yes, you've got the codes for where you're putting what colour and what fabric. There's your colour guide on page 3. And on page 2, like with every page of the pattern, you've got the descriptions of what everything is, and always, always, always put a little slither of the fabric next to each one as you go. It just makes your life that little bit easier when you're trying to figure it out later on. Right, enough wittering from me. I have created my little nest. I have my cutting board here. I've got my lovely little ruler here, and I always try and get a smaller ruler. I've got my rotary cutter there. I've got my ironing board here. Maybe if I move you over there, you'll get a better direction of it all. There we go. So I'm here. Hello. We are now going to start. So my first piece is cream. Now you can tell I'm just using... Hi, Gemma. How you feeling? I'm just using a little bit of cream to get myself ready. I'm going to push you back a little bit because then you'll see more of the screen. I'm just using a little bit of cream. You do not need a big section of cream. Gosh, 2 inches square will be more than enough. If you're a beginner, do 2.5. Just, you know, I'd rather you had more room, more fabric to do away with than not had enough. So I'm just going to cut a 2.5 inch square. And that is going to be far too big for what you're doing. And then our first little piece over here is purple. So this is the magenta that I'm using here. It's a gorgeous colorway. I love this color. And again, I've done this so many times. I'm cutting a really, really big piece because you can see the tiny little slither over there of the purple is really small. That is more than big enough to cover it. And what I'm doing is, if you've watched numbers 1, 2 already, you will know how you start this all off. You're putting the wrong side of your fabric there, and then the right side of your fabric to the right side of your fabric there, and you're going to stitch along that line. So you've always got the wrong side of your paper to the wrong side of your fabric here, and when you've got the pieces together, this is the wrong side. So just like with normal sewing, you put your right sides together, and we're going to sew a line from along there, but we're sewing from this side of the paper. And I know all of you have just gone, huh? Say what? Oh my goodness, if I had been a little more organized, I would have actually noticed that I don't have any thread in my machine. Awkward. Bear with, caller. Apologies, I hadn't realized I'd de-threaded my machine. Supposedly a professional. I just saw Gemma is watching from her sick bed. She's not been very well. She's a bit poorly. So we're all sending Gemma massive hugs. I hope you're feeling better now, my darling. The thread I'm using for this is the gorgeous Aurifil collection. I'm using a cream for the moment. I've also done an Aurifil thread box for this collection, which has been very popular. Whoops. And I am not in my home studio, so I haven't got my open boxes ready to show you, so apologies for that. Come on. There we go. That is really tight again. Sorry, should have had this ready to go. And you know, when people are watching, you can never thread a sewing machine. Come on. What is going on? Jenny Raymond has a trick that you actually lick the needle, not the thread. And apparently it worked. And Jenny struck again, my gorgeous Jenny Raymond. And I have not enough bobbin thread. Yay, got that all sorted now. Why is this so tight? Right, so let's try that again. Sorry about that. That video that you've done on Thursday was so funny. Thank you, Daniel. My husband is such a sweetie pie. Right, so back where we were. You are now going to align your cream up and your purple up. And we're going to pretend I had threaded the machine all the way along. And remember to decrease your stitch length. And I always try and have my needle down as I'm sewing. And there we go. There we go. So we've done our first seam along there. Now what you need to do is get rid of any excess that you've got. So you always fold this down. Get all the threads that you want to chop off on this side. So you will have your threads and paper, threads and fabric you want to get rid of will be on that side of the seam line. You take your ruler and you line up 1/4 of an inch and you just trim off that excess. Now, as you can tell, I've done this a lot, which is why we only had this much as our cutoff. You must do what feels comfortable for you. Okay, so when I press it, I hold the iron all the way down and I then move that across. Okay, so all I've done is I've pressed that open, and you can see on the back that has stitched beautifully. Now what you're looking for with your stitch length is you're wanting that to be close enough that if you tore the paper would come out, not being too far apart, that you want to be able to tear the paper but not the stitches when you put it together. So number 3 is our next piece, which is a purple piece. So I always fold on where the stitch line is going to go, and I try and go 1/4 inch past the stitch line to make sure that I've got enough fabric. Fold that back, and that's not quite enough. So this one's a bit of a funny angle. So you'll see where I'm positioning it, it's at a bit of a funny angle. It's not a straight line. But when I fold that back, hopefully that will be big enough. We're going to trust the process. And I always ask you to check and watch the other videos on how we do that. And if you get it wrong, I need you to just remember, you've got to be kind to yourself. If you get it wrong, that's okay. It's a learning experience. If you don't get it right the first time, you'll get it right the 3rd time or the 4th time. Just keep trying. You will get there. Okay, so exactly like before, I've folded everything I want to keep. And I'm just going to trim my threads as I go. It just makes your life that little bit easier. I'm going to set my seam, so I put the iron straight on the fabric as I go, and then I roll that over. And there we go. So you can see that's what we're trying to create. And I'm not sure I can show you. Yes, you can just see it there. That's the edge of my fabric. There you go. You can see the edge of my fabric there. So you can see what I meant is you maneuver it into the light to be able to just see where the outline of your fabric is, to make sure that this little section over here, plus 1/4 inch seam allowance, that you've got enough fabric to do it. The main one that's normally the issue is this little section over here, because sometimes you haven't got enough seam allowance over there to do it. So my top tip there is you actually, and in fact, that's really close. So you can see I've done a little fold there, and I need to make sure that I've got 1/4 inch this way. So actually I was taking a bit of a chance with that one, and I've just done it. Yes, I'm happy with that. So just be careful. Rather cut your piece of fabric a lot bigger than you think you need it, because it saves you unpicking and getting it wrong. Next, number C4 is a cream section. So this is, sorry, A4. That's our little cream section we're now going to fill. So when I get my little piece of fabric, I'm just going to cut a really big piece. This has been in my bag for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I'm just going to give that a nice, good little press. Make sure it's as flat as it can be when I do it. And I am really looking forward to having my own little studio in my house. The minute my loft is finished, I will be able to do this in my studio. You'll have better angles, better cameras, and you'll be able to see what we are doing, other than what you're doing now and just seeing it random. So now we're stitching between the A2, A3 line, and we're sewing on the piece that's called A4. Okay. You can see that that's a little stitch that we're doing there. Everything I want to keep, I'm going to fold down to below my seam allowance, and I'm going to trim off everything on this side of my seam. Making sure I pull my threads that way as well, just to make my life a little easier, trimming the threads as I go. And as I've been doing this, you'll see I've got little pieces left over. This piece is definitely big enough to be used. This piece is big enough. These little pieces I don't think are big enough, so I leave those to one side, and they then go into my little charity bin, or to one of my ladies who does crumb quilting, and sometimes she takes those and makes crumb quilts out of them. Right, so that's number 4. Going to press that open. We've got 11 seams in this. Sorry, it's up to A11, so I think we've got 10 seams in total. We're now 40% of the way through. There we go. You can then turn this back round, and you can just see the outline of the cream fabric there. So you've got more than enough fabric there. That's perfect. Next, we're going to do number 5. So just like before, I'm going to fold on the A5 sew line, just to check I know where I'm going. I'm going to take my little piece of fabric that I've got here, and I'm going to cut a bigger piece than I need. And I'm going to take that, I'm going to put that on my little A5 sew line, fold that back, check I've got enough fabric, position it to where I want it to be, and voila! I am now ready to sew on A5. Right, this is going reasonably well. I always get very nervous when FPP goes well. Normally something's about to collapse. So just take it nice and slow. Triple check everything before you sew it. Everything you need goes onto that side, and we're getting rid of everything there. And there we go. So now when I fold that back, you can see we've got those gorgeous petals of this flower, and it's just starting to take shape. Give everything a nice good press, and I hold it up to the light to check that I've got more than enough for the seam allowances all the way around. And when I do that, you can see we've got more than enough all the way around of this extra cream. It's better to have too much than too little of the cream, of the background. So we're now doing number 6. Number 6 is going to be my green. I've chosen to use it for this green. You'll see in the kit on Monday, we've got a slightly different green in the bundle. And I love going in on the show because every time I do, Natasha and Gemma pick the most fabulous colours to do a special sort of K for tilde. It's just, I love what they choose. It's always so beautiful. So there we go. We are now doing number 6. Remember, we've only got 10. Well, 11 pieces, 10 seams. We've just sewn number 6 on our 5th seam, so we're probably just a little bit more than halfway. So when I say to you I've got a lot more cream than I needed, you can see I've got about 1 inch and a bit extra cream here, which you didn't really need, but I'd rather have a piece that was too big and then I'm not having to unpick. So all I'm doing next is everything I'm getting rid of is going onto that side of my seam allowance, on my seam, and I'm just trimming all that away. And then pressing that little bit back. What I am going to do is on this side of the page, I'm just going to start trimming off these extra threads because they can get in the way. You can see I've got loads of extra threads here. Just neaten up your work as you go. It just makes your life that little bit easier. And there we go. So now we have got our seam. So that's our first leaf. And now we're going to put the second leaf on over here, which is number 7. Now on all of FPP, what's really important is to look at where your seams are. Now, just over here, that point there is meant to meet that exactly. So what I've noticed there is I'm 1 millimeter out. So if I pull this back, you can see when I press this, I've got a tiny little bit of overhang on this fabric over here. And on this one, I've got a tiny bit of overhang. That's what causes this to be slightly out. So it's either you're pressing or when you did the stitching, you're not quite on the line. Now for me, I am not bothered by having the seam not match exactly right. All I know is that when I do that, I just know that it's not going to be quite right, and I just accept that. And you just kind of make it work. For me, it isn't a problem, Other people it might be. So just when you're pressing back, make sure that you take care when you are pressing that you're getting it as accurate as you possibly can, and you're pulling your fabric as taut as you can. So as I showed you, I was a little bit out. So when I've done my seam over here, you might not be able to see, I've done a little bit of a maneuver with my stitching. You'll notice that I've moved my stitch line there a little bit lower than the line, and I'm hoping that will mean that my point over there will be caught because I've just managed to correct that. So that's another way of doing it, is if you have made a little bit of an error there, you can do a little bit of subtle manipulation with the way that you stitch to be able to hit that point perfectly. And, oh, it's not perfect, but you can see I've hit the point there, but I'm a little bit out there. So that is another way of doing it. But the reason that I've got that point not meeting is because you can see as I'm moving that, I've got a little bit too much fabric on this end. I should have pressed that a little better. So that's why you'll end up with a bit of a difference on these. Hi, Ann Davies. So now we have a little flower. So now all we've got to do is 2 pieces of cream on the bottom and then the 4 corners around the side. I've just sewn on number 7. Number 8 is my cream section over here. So I'm going to press along the line that we've got to sew along. Going to do that. Now my piece of cream that I'm going to use, I'm going to try using one of these little offcut pieces that I've got. Oh my. No, that's not going to work. Oh my goodness. It's very close. I do not recommend this. I'm using that tiny little piece and I'm risking it. There is a strong chance it's not going to work and I'm going to have to unpick. I'm admitting that, and I've got my box of Black Magics in case I do have to unpick. Hopefully I don't. Hopefully I don't. Oh. Right, let's get rid of what we don't need. Girls and boys, cross your fingers. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, hopefully, hopefully. What do we think? Am I going to have done it? What do we think? Oh, it's going to be close, I think. Oh. Don't use pieces that are too small. I said that from the beginning. This is what you end up having to do. Oh, that's so bloody annoying. We all knew it was going to happen, didn't we? We all knew. I knew. I said at the time it was going to happen. Ugh. Right, which ones am I going to have? What am I going to have? Are we having orange or dreamy fudge? I think actually fudge is the answer. There we go. One little fudge piece. So annoying. So a little bit of fudge. Unpick the section. Oh, that's so annoying. Sorry, boys and girls. As I'm doing this, Gemma wants orange. What have we had message-wise? Hello, Gillian. You make it easy when I have fabric and the pattern in the front. I love it. So Ali's saying, Johnny, make it look so easy, but when I have fabric and pattern in front of me, my mind goes blank. I have the pattern and the fabric set aside. I just look and stroke the fabric. Nothing wrong with that. Loving this project. My first bomb and my first FPP. Jenny, well done. I just finished wallpapering the bathroom. Bought the paper 15 years ago. Good job. I still like it. Oh, goodness. Oh, Gemma's being looked after by her dashies. Turkish Delight. Oh, Ali, I love a good Turkish Delight. So we're almost there, unpicking the seam that I told you I was going to get wrong. Always cut the piece bigger than you think you need. Do as I say, not as I do. Right. Now that I've done that, pull the threads out. Now, if you have unpicked on FPP, always pull every single thread out before you stitch again. John and I could share a box of chocolates rather nicely. I don't want the fudge ones or the Turkish Delight. Oh, okay. Now, when you do this, it is so important to pull these threads out as you go, especially on FPP, because your stitches are so tiny. If you do leave a thread in there, or you do leave something in there, you are going to end up having a problem when you sew something on top of it, because you may very well end up having those tiny little bits of thread left over. So what's great now is I've got a solid line that I know is going to work. I'm just going to press this because, again, it's been in my cupboard for a very long time. Get that as flat as it can go. Come along. Right, so line that back up along that seam that we're going to be sewing, and I'll maneuver you back down. And we're going to sew along that line, making sure that I have enough. There we go. Right, let's try that again. Okay. Well, there's actually nothing to trim off there, because I am proud to say that one worked quite well. So I'm now going to press that back. Right, so now we are going to do number 9, which is this piece over here, which is the light purple. So for the light purple, this is going to take a little bit of math, forgive me. So I'm going to cut 4.5-inch lips that way. What size is it that way? Right, let's try this. Okay, so we're doing number 9, which is this bit up here. Fold that forward. I am going to trim this a little bit because I've got a little bit of green popping out. And when you do put these all together, if you have got a darker colour coming through the lighter colour, it can be distracting when you put the blocks together. So if you have got any of the darker fabric sticking through, get rid of it now. So you can see I had a tiny little slither of the green. All I'm doing now is when I fold that back, if I fold it like that, you can't see the green anymore, but before you could see the green. So you just want to make sure that you've gotten rid of the green in the background, just in case. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, just make sure you get rid of it. Right, so we're doing number 9, which is over here. Folding that. Okay, so that's number 9. Get rid of everything you don't need. Trim off these little bits left. I've got a nice big piece of cream there you can use. A little bit of cream there you can use. So what's so great about this technique is you can see that now if you press these right, you've just got that edge kissing that little bit there ever so beautifully. You've just got to take it nice and slow and make sure you get it right. What I'm going to trim off here is a little bit of excess, but not right to the edge of the purple, because we don't need all that purple on. And I'm just going to trim this down a little bit as well, not to the seam allowance end yet, just because this piece of purple, I don't know if it will. No, it won't. Dare I risk it again? No, I'm not risking it again. I've already unpicked. Right, we've done number 9. You can see I've got all these little threads left on here. I'm just going to trim these off now as I go along. Just makes it a little bit cleaner for you when you're working. You don't have all those threads lying around. So we're going to do number 10, which is over here. Again, flick that round. Right side of your fabric to right side of your fabric. Fold where your number 10 seam line is. And you put that down over there. Almost there, boys and girls. We're now on number 10. I think, oh, sorry, they're 13. We're almost there. Sorry, I thought we had 11. So exactly like before, you fold back what you don't need, and I'm going to put that underneath your ruler. Everything you do want to get rid of is on this side of your seam allowance. Trim that down. This little piece we'll definitely use again, and the rest will just slide over there. And now we just press that little bit back. Okay, so that was number 10. And again, I'm just going to trim this a little bit down. Not to the seam allowance section just yet, just to be able to make sure that this is a bit more easy to manage. So that's where we are now. So we're missing a bit of cream, and we're missing these 2 corners over here. I've just sewed on number 10 here. So number 11 is this cream section over here. So I'm stitching on the cream line over there. Going to go through the bits that I've cut off, and doesn't look like there's a piece big enough. And I don't think that, oh, that might, hang on. So that's at a bit of a funny angle, so I'd rather cut it bigger. So I'm going to cut there and press that nice and flat. And we press that. And there we go. So that's number 11, the cream section on there. Everything you want to get rid of goes onto the top bit of your thingy-me-bobby-me-booby-me-beeby. And those we definitely can use again. And I'm going to press that back. Now, even now, you can start to see how this block is taking shape We've still got 2 big pieces of fabric to add in. But you can see how the flower's taking shape. We've still got the corner over here and the corner over here to add. This one's the first one, which is number 12. We're going to fold along there, but before I do that, I'm going to trim off this extra bit of cream, which we don't need. Got this extra bit of cream we don't need. And I'm going to take off this little bit of cream here as well. Just roughly, because I know we don't need that much. It just means when I come to sew these on, it's just that little bit easier to be able to do. Right, I'm going to press that again because I've cut off some of the fabric. Right, 2 more seams to go. This is number 12. We're going to do that one first. Fold back on your seam line where you're going to be stitching. I use this little piece of fabric and see if I've got enough. I'm not sure if I do, and I definitely do. That's a huge piece compared to what I need. Brilliant, happy with that. Make sure that you've got, so when you're folding back and you're looking, make sure you check this edge and this edge, because you sometimes forget that you have to have the seam allowance going right to the edge of the fabric here, because if you forget that bit, you could end up with your seam failing when you put everything together, and that is the very last thing you want. Before you press everything in and you start sewing, just make sure you fold that all back flat and check everything's nice and flat. Occasionally, I have had occasions where a piece that I'm adding on has caused, it's folded over. So you want to avoid that like anything. And by that I mean that I've stitched on before and this piece is folded over, and you need to avoid that like crazy because it happens, but yeah. Don't want it. Right, only 1 more piece to go. One more piece to go. One more piece to go. I'm not sure this is going to be big enough, but I'm going to look anyway, just in case. Ooh. So now we just need to trim it all up. So trimming up is really simple. I've got a standard way of doing it that I always make sure that I'm trimming all my blocks at exactly the same point all the way along. So what I'll do is I'll trim this piece here and I'll show you what I mean. So you'll see that this trimmed edge over here, it's about 1 millimeter away from that seam line. So this is the seam line, sorry, the seam allowance line. That dark line there is this line you're going to sew on. And then that little bit there is your seam allowance. So I always make sure that I'm 1 millimeter out. But when I trim my block up, I make sure that I'm the same size all the way around the block. And I try and be consistent on every one of the blocks. The reason being is that too often people cut exactly on the edge there. And when you do cut on that seam allowance edge, if you've made an error, you won't know if you are exactly on the seam allowance or if you've slipped and gone a little bit below. And if you've gone a little bit below, you may actually be putting these on at sort of 1/8 of an inch, or it just wouldn't be quite as accurate. And when you're spending so much time making sure that this is as accurate as possible, just try and make sure you do it as simply as you can. And there is our block. Now, if like me, you are a little bit of a perfectionist and you want to make sure that you've done everything possible, what I do at this point is I've made, sorry, I'm wobbly, I apologize. I've made my first block. I've got 4 blocks to make. So what I do is I now go and I look at my block and I look really closely. So I know I have made an error over here. I showed you that as I was making it. So I know that my pressing was wrong on this section here. You can see I've got a bit of a lip there. Goodness me, I need a manicure. Apologies, boys and girls. So you can see over here I'm a little bit short, okay? And then you can see over here, I'm a lot better on those. But this point over here, I missed because of my pressing, okay? Even when I press it there, you can see there's a little bobble. Okay, over here, I missed my point over there, but I nailed it over there. That is exactly what I'm looking for. So when I've missed it over there, what I do is I turn the block over and I look and I can see that I actually stitched a little bit on this side of the line. So that's where I've gone wrong on that section over there. This bit is perfect. And as you can see, I've nailed it because I've stitched exactly on that line there. And it's just, you do not under any circumstances need to do this, but you can see over there, I've hit the point perfectly. Over there, perfectly. That is so good. And you can tell over there, it's perfect. That is exactly what we're looking for with FPP. And I know I'm bouncing around, but you can see that is exactly what we're looking for. That is exactly what we're looking for. There, I've just missed it. Over there, I've just missed it. So I know that either my pressing's gone wrong. You can see that over here, nope, the pressing's okay there. Maybe my green is a little out, or on the stitch that I've done there, I'm a little wobbly. And I think it's just important to look at the block. And you're doing this, look into my eyes, all of you. You're doing this with kindness. You're not being mean to yourself. It's just that you know that the next 3 that you make, if those little errors, and they are so minuscule, they are so tiny, all it means is you just take a little bit more care when you go over joints, because that way then you're going to hit the point perfectly. And when you're doing the iron, you just press it that little bit harder. But you do it kindly, otherwise I'm going to come and find you. And you could be kind to yourself. You're kind to other people, be kinder to yourself. And there we go. That is block 3. We have got 7 more blocks to go. Watch blocks 1 and 2 if you like. I am on Natasha Makes on Monday, the 14th of March, in 2 days' time at 10 a.m. That's Natasha Makes on Facebook and on YouTube. And I'll also be doing an amazing Jenny Raymond make as well. So do join me for that. And thank you so much for being here today. There's block 3. Look forward to seeing you. And don't forget to look out on Natasha's show for the amazing colorway that she always comes up with. Have a good one. If I've missed any of your live feed messages, I'm really sorry. I'm going to try and go through them now.